What are modern myths and why do we need them? The importance of escaping all the demands and problems of the real world for a few minutes a day shouldn't be clearer than in these days. But good entertainment is more than just escapism. If the storytelling is right, if the idea behind a film, book or series has universal character, i.e. can appeal to everyone because it conveys fundamental values of human existence, then these stories can become modern myths. After all, there's a reason why even in deepest Afghanistan, in the African jungle, in China, Japan, Siberia, the Andes, and the Australian outback, you can find people who have heard of Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Captain Kirk, Superman and Spider-Man. These characters work across cultures because they embody universal human archetypes with just such characteristics. They are universal and timeless, even though the aforementioned characters come from Western culture. While this is so, Joseph Campbell, American professor of comparative mythology and religious research, has documented already in 1949 in his basic work Hero with a Thousand Faces. The hero's journey is a concept that can be found in the stories of all modern and historical cultures and religions around the world, so he rightly gave this phenomenon the name monomyth. A small digression regarding Joseph Campbell, with regards from Wikipedia. The fascination of Campbell, who grew up Roman Catholic, with myths began in childhood, when he studied the myths of the various Indian tribes. Carl Gustav Jung, Friedrich Nietzsche, Arthur Schopenhauer, but also James Joyce and Thomas Mann, in whose works he saw the spirit of myth realized in a contemporary way. They had a great influence on him. In 1924, he met the Indian philosopher Krishnamurti, which fanned Campbell's interest in Indian and Hindu myths. Campbell's four-volume work, The Masks of God, published between 1959 and 1968, covers the mythology of the entire world, from ancient to modern times. Where The Hero of a Thousand Faces focuses on the commonality of mythology, the Mask of God books focus on historical and anthropological variations that the monomyth takes on, the folk ideas, the folklore. The four volumes are divided into primitive mythology, Oriental mythology, Occidental mythology, and creative mythology. Campbell looked at mythology, religion, and the symbols used by them and showed universal patterns of experience that can be traced in all mythologies of this earth. In doing so, he drew on the death psychology of Carl Gustav Jung, among others. According to Campbell, the goal of this comparative myth research was to carefully distinguish between universal structures of myths and local particularities of the same myths. Elemental ideas about the structure of human life, such as the hero's journey, are found in mythologies all around the world, where they arose independently. They served as a vital orientation in the life of every human being, which people no longer have in modern times, especially in the West, where religions and myths play only subordinate roles or have been largely ousted. The supposedly modern man lacks convincing myths, with which they can gain meaning and orientation of their own life. In addition, every mythology also had the task of regulating the social interaction of the tribe, the city, the state, and to ensure a harmonious coexistence. Myths and stories are thus essential for a harmonious coexistence in one's own cultural environment. Campbell's thesis is that this second function of mythology first became the dominant function in Babylonia during the time of Sargon of Akkad, 2356 before Christ to 2300 before Christ. The myth of Sargon tells of Sargon legitimizing his claim to kingship through the love of the goddess Ishtar. Mythology is used here primarily as a justification of a claim to rule. The same pattern was later found in Moses and similarly in all major monotheistic religions. With the legitimizing function of myth for political rule, however, the universal idea of understanding man himself through his humanity as a divine being became a disruptive factor and was increasingly suppressed. Religious wars and gods with claims to omnipotence were the result, poison for the slow process of a human being's maturity from a dependent creature to a self-responsible creator of his own life. According to Campbell, this development reached its unsurpassable climax with the Second World War. Since this catastrophe, the insight has slowly but steadily prevailed that not this or that area of land, but the earth is home of man. However, a myth of mankind in which the earth is home of man does not yet exist. Campbell considered it inevitable to create such a myth, but he also pointed out that people cannot force such a thing. The next mythology can no more be predicted than the dream of the coming night, because a mythology is not an ideology. It is not designed by the brain, but experienced by the heart. Besides the mystical and cosmological function, myths also have sociological and educational psychological functions. And with this, we return to the modern myth. Since the need for myths exists indispensably also in modern non-religious people, it is precisely the entertainment media which have taken over this role in the end of the 20th century, and therefore just archetypes and stories as they are described in the hero's journey, which has existed universally since time immemorial, have taken the place of religions and myths and inspired millions of people to rise above themselves and become the heroes of their own life story. Countless people, for example, have been inspired by watching Star Trek in their youth to go into science and research and take their own hero's journey there. And by the way, what is Star Trek but a fictional version of that new mythology of a total humanity that Campbell wanted, in which humanity has overcome all its internal quarrels and as co-founders of the Federation of United Planets, a kind of United Nations in space, dedicates itself to the exploration of the universe. Or take a look at Star Wars. Who didn't get a warm feeling in the pit of their stomach at Obi-Wan Kenobi's description of the Force? The Force is what gives the Jedi his strength. It is an energy field that all living things generate. It surrounds us, it permeates us, it holds the galaxy together. The desire to be part of something larger, mystical, despite all our individualism, is in all of us, and that's why we love stories that tell us that. We need heroes to inspire us, stories that shape, challenge, or confirm our morals and values. But, and this is where the rub comes in, these stories and modern myths must come from the heart and not be the result of ideology-infested identity politics that want to force the supposedly modern ideological worldview on us with all their might. As Campbell rightly said, mythology, unlike ideology, is not designed by the brain, and many people, especially those who are ideology-free, reject such stories because they have a keen sense that this is precisely not modern mythology, or even social progress or an open society, but perfidious sledgehammer propaganda for a misguided ideology. Think about it again. Storytelling was already ingrained in man when he couldn't even put the concept into words. What, for example, are the cave paintings of the Stone Age people, but stories? An ancient comic strip, so to speak. The Gilgamesh epic, Homer's Odyssey, the Roman and Greek worlds of the gods with all their archetypes and intrigue, Beowulf, the Norse myths, the Celtic myths, Talmud, Bible and Quran, Star Wars, Star Trek and Lord of the Rings. All stories and myths that, on balance, serve to sustain man, inspire him, and ultimately remind him that even of himself, the consumer of these stories, ultimately only one such story will remain. And the only question is whether his story will be quickly forgotten or preserved for posterity 1,000 years from now. This is due to the hero's journey of each individual, and also there we have to be honest with ourselves. Millions and millions of people have perished in the maelstrom of time, even if they may have been heroes on the smallest scale. Nevertheless, I conclude with the words, we are all stories in the end. See to it that yours becomes a timeless one.